So oftentimes when I hear people talk about their sleep, how good it is or how bad it is, they're mostly focused on one single factor, which is sleep duration. Like, am I getting enough sleep? Am I getting my 8 hours in order to be able to function properly? And sleep duration, while important, is really just one factor in the overall sleep health framework. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the 6 different components of sleep health that you should be mindful of and be thinking about in order to really make sure that your sleep health is as good as possible, as well as some strategies, tips, and tricks to make sure that you are optimizing each ingredient to make sure that you're getting some good sleep. Hi, if you don't know me, my name is Dr. Parky. I'm a clinical psychologist and behavioral sleep medicine specialist. I did my postdoctoral fellowship at Stanford Sleep Health and Insomnia program, and I love talking and sharing everything evidence-based, especially the things that are non-pharmacological, so no medication needed when it comes to improving your sleep health. So that's why I'm here, and let's get into the video. So this sleep health framework comes from Dr. Daniel Baisi, who is a sleep scientist, and he understood that the absence of a sleep problem is not the presence of sleep health. Just because you don't have insomnia doesn't mean you necessarily sleep well. So he wanted to identify the main factors, the main ingredients needed to actually have fulsome sleep health, and he did it under this framework, RU sated, which we'll go through each letter in more detail. So the first 2 letters, RU, stand for regularity. So regularity basically stands for, are you going to bed and waking up, getting out of bed around the same time every single day? And there's some research that even suggests that regularity is a more potent predictor of overall health compared to sleep duration. So the regularity of your sleep may be even more important than how much sleep you're actually getting. And in terms of regularity, the reason why it's important comes towards our sort of circadian internal clock. So our internal clock is not always perfectly mapped to the clock on the wall. It needs certain signals to say, oh, this is my time to wake up, and this is my time to go to bed and do all that other stuff. And that's one reason why you feel so bad sometimes when you travel to a different time zone and experience jet lag, because your internal clock is no longer well mapped to the clock on the wall. But the same thing can happen if sometimes we're waking up at 5 a.m., sometimes 8 a.m., going to bed at 10 p.m., going to bed at midnight. That irregularity can lead to a similar amount of jet lag as traveling from time zone to time zone does. So one of the most powerful timekeepers for our circadian rhythm to really get that sort of strong, steady signal is sunlight. So if you're getting sunlight every day around the same time in the morning, that can be a really powerful and potent influencer of setting your circadian clock. So, for example, if you wake up at 7 every day, get a little bit of sunlight, your body will over time begin to really strengthen and say, okay, this is my time to wake up. And then, let's say 11 or 12 is my time to go to bed. It just allows for a really steady circadian signal. So after RU, S stands for satisfaction. So this is more of a subjective experience. Did I notice that my sleep overall kind of felt satisfactory and that I felt pretty good when I woke up, or the sleep itself felt pretty deep? And there's a number of different factors that influence our sense of satisfaction, one being kind of understanding how we should feel on a day-to-day and how deep sleep should be. So some people with insomnia think I should go to bed and immediately fall asleep and then wake up feeling completely refreshed. But we know that even for the best sleepers, that's not necessarily true. Our sleep stages or sleep goes through stages throughout the night, and there's going to be times where we will wake up, toss and turn, go to bed, go to the bathroom, for example, and then come back and fall asleep within a few minutes, and that's completely normal, as well as the sort of morning inertia where we feel a little bit groggy, our sleep chemicals are still being pushed out. So that's not necessarily an indicator of poor sleep quality. It's just a natural kind of experience a phenomenon that happens during the transition between sleep and wake, kind of like when you're starting your engine in the car, like it takes a little bit of time for the car to warm up. But you might notice as you kind of focus on some of these other factors, these other components of sleep health, your satisfaction of sleep might naturally increase. So we'll continue talking about how to improve these other factors as well as what they are. So the A in RU stated stands for alertness. So how do you feel during the day? Because obviously sleep is consolidated at night, but its influence during the day is perhaps equally, if not more so, important. And it's important to understand that improved sleep doesn't necessarily always translate into improved daytime functioning. It's one part of it, but there's a lot of other factors that influence how we feel. Like we talked about the sleep inertia in the morning. That's just a natural time where we feel a little bit groggy, as well as the postprandial dip, otherwise known as the post-lunch dip, where we just feel a little bit more groggy. There's a circadian dip that just happens naturally around 1 to 3 p.m. So there's going to be times and pockets of time where you're going to notice the alertness reduce. But overall, if you're getting enough duration, your efficiency is good, your sleep is pretty regular, then you're doing everything from a sleep perspective to make sure that you're generally feeling as good as possible during the day. The T stands for sleep timing. So, are you sleeping at sort of the appropriate time based off your own internal clock, otherwise known as chronotype? You may have heard the terms like early bird or night owl or, things somewhere in between, where what is kind of your feeling best performance? Are you someone who just notices that there's somebody who prefers to go to bed a little bit later, wake up a little bit later, or vice versa? Someone who goes to bed a little bit earlier, wakes up a bit earlier, or just somewhere in the middle, otherwise known as intermediate? And finding the right sort of timing for you is going to be important to make sure that you are following your body's clock. In some cases, it's a bit harder, especially the people who are super night owls where you have to wake up early for work, but you can't really go to bed at 3 a.m. and wake up at 10. So in those cases, there's some compromise that has to be made. But for the most part, if you can kind of follow your general body's feeling best rhythm, that is a good way to really make sure your sleep is as high quality as possible. The E stands for sleep efficiency. Sleep efficiency is just a fancy term for how much time in bed are you actually sleeping relative to how much time you're spending in bed. So, for example, someone who sleeps 6 hours but they spend 10 hours in bed, 6 divided by 10 times 100 for 100% would be 60%. So, your sleep efficiency would be 60% of the time you're actually in bed is actually spent sleeping. For example, if you actually slept 7 hours but you spent 8 hours in bed, then your sleep efficiency would be 87.5%. So, generally, good sleepers fall between somewhere around 85 to 90%. Anything more is a maybe an indicator that you need a little bit more sleep, like you're a little bit too sleepy, but less than 80% tends to be like you're moving into the insomnia realm where you're spending a bit too much time in bed awake, which means that it would be important to squeeze out some of those awakenings. So sleep efficiency is usually a pretty good indicator of overall quality because it basically says that your body is in a state ready for sleep when you're in bed, and it's actually using most of the time you're in bed for sleep. So one way that you can increase sleep efficiency is to make sure how much time you're spending in bed is pretty close to how much sleep you're producing, at least right now. If you notice that you're needing a little bit more sleep, you can obviously increase the window and give yourself more time. But for the most part, if you're spending, for example, 9 hours in bed but only getting 7 hours of sleep, then it might be worthwhile to experiment with reducing how much time you're spending in bed just a little bit to increase that efficiency in the pursuit of quality over quantity. And finally, the D in Are You Sated stands for duration. So, are you getting enough sleep based off your own sleep needs? And this is going to be highly individual. Some people might need 7 hours of sleep, other people might need nine. And it's important to kind of honor your own body's sleep needs to decide what is actually the right quantity for you. So, the 8 hour myth is exactly that. It's a myth. Not everybody needs 8 hours. Maybe the average person does, but you might be someone kind of somewhere else on the distribution curve. So, honor how much sleep you need. Make sure you're getting enough sleep while also maximizing quality by making sure you're not forcing yourself into a shoe that's too big for you by spending 9 or 10 hours in bed when you might need less than that. So in this way you can kind of make sure that all of your bases are covered when it comes to sleep health, regularity, satisfaction, alertness, timing, efficiency, and duration. So hopefully this video was helpful to learn a little bit more about the different components of sleep health. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.